If you ever stepped into an American school in the 1980s, you remember the sound. The squeak of sneakers on waxed hallway floors, the metallic slam of locker doors echoing down corridors, the crackle of the PA system before the morning announcements. And if you close your eyes right now, you can probably smell it too. That distinct combination of pencil shavings, cafeteria mystery meat, and cheap cologne. Someone sprayed too liberally in the bathroom. This is what school was really like in the 1980s. Welcome back to Time-Washed Stories. I'm here to take you on a journey, not through textbooks or statistics, but through the actual lived experience of going to school in one of the most memorable decades in American history. The 1980s were a unique time to be a student. We were caught between two worlds, the analog past and the digital future. We had enough freedom to feel independent, but enough structure to feel safe. We were the last generation to experience school without the internet, without cell phones, without the constant digital noise that defines education today. So whether you were there or you're just curious what it was really like, settle in, because today we're going back. Your alarm clock wasn't a phone vibrating on your nightstand. It was an actual clock, probably digital with red numbers, maybe one of those classic wind-up bells that could wake the entire house. And there was no snooze button you could tap mindlessly. If you wanted 5 more minutes, you had to physically slam your hand down on that button. You stumbled to the bathroom and looked at yourself in the mirror. If you were a guy, maybe you were working on growing out your hair, trying to get that perfect feathered look, or maybe going for something closer to what you saw in a Duran Duran video. If you were a girl, you might have been teasing your bangs to impossible heights, using enough Aqua Net hairspray to personally deplete the ozone layer. Your outfit mattered. It said everything about who you were, or who you wanted to be. Levi's 501 jeans, tight rolled at the ankles, a members-only jacket, neon windbreakers, oversized sweatshirts with geometric patterns that looked like a TV test screen, Converse All-Stars or Reeboks with the Velcro straps. And if you were really cool, maybe you had a Swatch watch or 2, or 3, stacked on your wrist. Breakfast was quick, maybe a bowl of cereal, Fruity Pebbles, Cap'n Crunch, or Lucky Charms, eaten while flipping through the back of a comic book or reading the side of the cereal box for the 100th time. Your mom might have been making eggs and toast, and somewhere in the background, the TV was on. Good Morning America, The Today Show, local news with the weatherman standing in front of a hand-drawn map. Then it was time for the bus. Walking to the bus stop meant bundling up if it was cold. A puffy jacket, maybe a trapper keeper clutched under your arm, your Walkman clipped to your belt if you were lucky enough to own one. You'd stand there with the same group of neighborhood kids, waiting, watching for that yellow bus to round the corner, and when it finally arrived, the doors would swing open with a hydraulic hiss, and you'd climb those 3 big steps into a world all its own. The bus was loud, chaotic, a moving social ecosystem where the hierarchy was clear. The cool kids sat in the back, the quiet kids sat near the front. The middle was no man's land. You learned quickly where you belonged. The seats were green vinyl, cracked and patched with duct tape. The windows fogged up in winter, and kids would draw faces or write their initials in the condensation. Someone always had a boombox. Someone else was passing around the latest issue of Mad magazine or a dog-eared copy of a Stephen King book. And the bus driver, usually a woman with a perm and enormous glasses, kept one eye on the road and one eye on the rearview mirror, ready to shout if things got too wild. It smelled like diesel fuel and teenage body spray. It sounded like laughter and arguments and the hum of the engine. And for 20 or 30 minutes, it was your world. When the bus pulled up to school, you'd see it. That big, sprawling building that was either red brick or tan concrete, with wide front steps and double doors that felt heavy when you pushed them open. Inside, the hallways stretched out like canyons. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. The floors were polished linoleum, usually in a checkerboard pattern or speckled beige, and everything echoed. Everything. Lockers lined both sides of the hallway, painted in the school colors, maybe blue and gold, or red and white. Your locker was your personal territory. You decorated it with stickers, magazine cutouts, a little magnetic mirror. Maybe you had a poster of your favorite band taped to the inside of the door. Bon Jovi, Madonna, The Cure, Def Leppard. If you were smart, you had a magnetic organizer with a shelf for books and hooks for your jacket. The lock was a combination lock, and you'd practiced your combo so many times you could do it without thinking. Spin right, stop at 12. Spin left, stop at 34. Spin right again, stop at 8. Pull. If it didn't open the first time, you'd kick the bottom of the door and try again. Between classes, the hallways became rivers of denim and hairspray. Everyone was moving, talking, laughing, shoving. Teachers stood in their doorways like lighthouse keepers, watching the chaos. Couples leaned against lockers, holding hands, whispering. Someone was always late, sprinting to class, backpack bouncing, and the fashion was everywhere. Girls wore acid-washed jeans, oversized blazers with the sleeves pushed up, lace gloves, jelly shoes, scrunchies in their hair. Guys wore parachute pants, graphic tees with slogans you'd never get away with today. High-top sneakers, maybe a thin leather tie if they were feeling bold. There was no Instagram, no TikTok, no way to instantly know what was trending across the country. So style was regional, personal, experimental. You wore what you saw on MTV or in the mall, and you made it your own. When you walked into a classroom, the first thing you noticed was the chalkboard. Big, green, stretching across the entire front wall. And when the teacher wrote on it, you heard that distinct scratch of chalk on board. Sometimes it squeaked. Sometimes it broke. And every so often, someone would scrape their nails down it just to watch everyone cringe. The teacher's desk sat front and center, covered in papers, folders, and a coffee mug that had seen better days. Above the chalkboard hung the alphabet in cursive, the Pledge of Allegiance printed on a poster, maybe a pull-down map of the United States, or the world desks were individual, those combo chair desk units with the little basket underneath for your books. If you were left-handed, good luck. You sat in rows, and your seat assignment mattered. If the teacher liked you, maybe you got to sit near your friends. If not, you were up front where they could keep an eye on you. There were no laptops, no tablets, no smartboards. Learning was analog. You took notes by hand. You wrote essays in pen or pencil, and if you made a mistake, you either scribbled it out or used whiteout, that little bottle of correction fluid that smelled like chemicals and took forever to dry. If you were fancy, you had an electric typewriter at home. If you were really fancy, your family had just bought one of those brand new personal computers. But even then, you probably didn't use it for school. When the teacher wanted to show you something visual, they'd wheel in the TV card. You remember the TV card, that big metal cart with the TV strapped to the top and the VCR on the shelf below. When you saw it coming down the hallway, you knew you were in for a good day. Maybe it was Bill Nye. Maybe it was a film strip about the water cycle. Maybe it was a recording of a historical speech or a documentary on ancient Egypt. The lights would go off. The static would crackle. And for 30 or 40 minutes, you could zone out while pretending to learn. But most of the time, learning was direct. The teacher stood at the front of the room and talked. You listened. You raised your hand if you had a question. You passed notes if you didn't. Teachers didn't have email, so if they needed to reach your parents, they called your house. And if you got in trouble, there was no text message home. There was a phone call, or worse, a note you had to get signed. Detention was real. So was getting sent to the principal's office. And the consequences felt heavier because there was no buffer, no digital distance. Everything was face-to-face. Math class meant showing your work on paper. Science class meant actual experiments, mixing baking soda and vinegar, dissecting frogs, growing bean plants in styrofoam cups. English class meant reading novels with worn covers, discussing them in circles, writing essays that your teacher marked up with red ink. And if you struggled, you couldn't just Google the answer. You asked a friend. You stayed after school. You went to the library. Lunchtime was the heartbeat of the school day. The cafeteria was massive, loud, and divided into invisible kingdoms. Jocks sat at one table, nerds at another, burnouts near the back, theater kids somewhere in the middle, cheerleaders in their own cluster, and everyone else filled in the gaps trying to figure out where they belonged. You walked through the lunch line with your tray, those beige plastic trays with dividers for each part of your meal. The lunch lady served you from behind a sneeze guard, scooping out portions with the efficiency of factory workers. The food was, let's call it, institutional. Rectangle pizza that somehow tasted amazing, sloppy joes that dripped everywhere, tater tots, chicken nuggets shaped like dinosaurs, corn that came out of a can, chocolate milk in little cartons, and on Fridays, maybe fish sticks that no one actually ate. If you brought your lunch from home, it came in a metal lunchbox, maybe Star Wars, G.I. Joe, strawberry shortcake, or a brown paper bag with your name written on it in marker. A sandwich, a bag of chips, a Capri Sun or a thermos full of Kool-Aid, maybe a Twinkie or a Little Debbie snack cake. Eating wasn't really the point, though lunch was about talking, laughing, trading snacks, passing around notes folded into intricate triangles, gossiping about who liked who broke up, who got in trouble in third period. There were no phones to scroll through, no earbuds to disappear into. You were just present, talking, connecting. And yeah, sometimes it was awkward. Sometimes you sat alone and felt invisible. But more often than not, you found your people. And if you were brave, lunchtime was when you made your move. You passed a note to your crush. You asked someone to the dance. You risked rejection in front of everyone. Social life wasn't just happening online later. It was happening right there, in real time, with real stakes. Gym class was its own special brand of chaos. First, there were the locker rooms, the smell of old sweat and cheap deodorant. Metal lockers slamming everyone changing into their gym clothes, usually a gray t-shirt and blue shorts with your last name written on them in permanent marker. If you forgot your gym clothes, you had to wear the loaner set from the Lost and Found, and everyone knew. Then you'd line up in the gym, that enormous room with polished wooden floors, basketball hoops on either end, climbing ropes hanging from the ceiling, and those big fold-out bleachers on the side. The coach, usually a guy with a whistle around his neck and a clipboard in his hand, would bark out the day's activity: dodgeball, kickball basketball, volleyball, square dancing, which everyone hated but secretly kind of loved, the presidential fitness test, which felt like a personal attack. You remember the parachute, right? That giant rainbow parachute you'd all hold while running in a circle, then pull it up and let it float down. You'd sit under it and feel like you were in some kind of magical dome. And then there were the ropes, the dreaded climbing ropes. The coach would blow the whistle and tell you to climb to the top. Some kids scurried up like Spider-Man. Others got halfway and froze, and some of us, let's be honest, just hung there, pretending to try. Outside of gym, there were clubs and activities, school plays, pep rallies, talent shows. If you were into sports, you had practice after school. If you were into music, you had band or choir. If you were into academics, maybe you joined the debate team or the science club. Dances were a huge deal. Homecoming, winter formal, the spring fling. You spent weeks planning your outfit, figuring out who you'd go with, worrying about whether anyone would ask you to slow dance when the DJ played Endless Love or Open Arms. The DJ, usually just a teacher with a turntable, would spin records and tapes. The gym would be decorated with crepe paper and balloons. The lights would be dim. And for a few hours, you'd dance under a disco ball, feeling like you were in a John Hughes movie. When the final bell rang, school wasn't over. It just shifted. If you rode the bus, you'd pile back on and retrace your morning route. If you walked, you'd head home with your friends, stopping at the convenience store for candy. Now and later's Pixie Sticks, Big League Chew, Blow Pops, or maybe a Slurpee. At home, you'd drop your backpack by the door and head straight for the TV. Afternoon cartoons were Sacred G.I. Joe, Transformers, He-Man, Thundercats. You'd sit cross-legged in front of the TV with a bowl of cereal or a plate of bagel bites, totally absorbed. If you had homework, you'd do it at the kitchen table. No internet to distract you, no phone buzzing with notifications. Just you, your textbook, and maybe the radio playing in the background. And when your homework was done, you'd go outside. You'd ride your bike until the streetlights came on. You'd play kickball in someone's yard. You'd build forts. You'd sit on the curb and just talk. Your parents didn't track your every move. You didn't check in every hour. You just existed. Free, independent, trusted. When you finally came home, your mom would shout, "Dinner's ready," and you'd all sit down together. No phones at the table, no screens, just conversation. And after dinner, maybe you'd watch TV as a family. The Cosby Show, Family Ties, Cheers. You'd laugh together, argue over what to watch, and when it was time for bed, you'd brush your teeth, set your alarm clock, and do it all over again tomorrow. So why do we miss it? Why does this era, this simple, analog, imperfect time, stay with us so vividly? I think it's because school in the 1980s felt real. Everything was tangible. The notes you passed were written by hand. The mixtapes you made took hours. The friendships you built happened face to face, not through a screen. You couldn't curate your image or delete your mistakes. You just lived, and you figured it out as you went. There was a freedom in that, a kind of presence we've lost. We weren't worried about likes or followers. We weren't comparing our lives to highlight reels. We were just kids, trying to survive math class and impress our crushes and figure out where we fit in. And yeah, it wasn't perfect. Not everyone felt included. Not everyone had it easy. The 1980s had problems, big ones. But there was also a simplicity, a groundedness that's hard to find today. We were the last generation to grow up without the internet. We remember what it was like to be bored, to wait, to wonder, to have to figure things out on our own. And maybe that's why we look back with such fondness. Because those years shaped us. They taught us resilience, creativity, independence. They gave us memories that feel almost mythical now, like they happened in another world. Because in a way they did. So if you were there, if you lived it, I hope this brought you back, even just for a moment. And if you weren't, I hope you got a glimpse into what it was really like. What do you remember most about school in the 1980s? Drop a comment below. Let's keep the memories alive. Thanks for watching Time Wash Stories. I'll see you in the next one.